Yo, be honest. Did you ever sneak a game into your PlayStation 2 you definitely weren't supposed to be playing? Yeah, you know the one. Violent, crazy, sometimes straight up banned, but you played it anyway. We're diving into the most controversial PS2 games ever. Some that were censored, others flat out banned in countries, and a few that had parents and politicians losing their minds. Let's rewind the clock and talk about why these games made headlines and why we loved them anyway. Back in the day, if you had a PlayStation 2, there's a solid chance this next title ended up in your collection. Not because it was a great game, but because it was different. And let's be real, it had that forbidden vibe that made it even more tempting to play. We're talking about Leisure Suit Larry. A wild ride of awkward pickup lines, ridiculous college parties, and enough adult humor to make any parent freak out. You played as Larry Lovage, a wannabe ladies' man trying to prove his charm on a reality dating show. The goal? Flirt, impress, and survive the cringe-worthy minigames while trying not to get humiliated. Sounds like a fever dream, but somehow it worked. The gameplay was nothing too crazy. Third-person, kind of open-world, cartoonish visuals, and a bunch of over-the-top side activities that made you question your life choices. One minute you're in a dorm room, the next you're drunk and peeing in random places. Yeah, it got weird real quick. But what really stirred the pot wasn't the gameplay. It was the presentation. Suggestive posters on loading screens, exaggerated female characters, and a tone that danced right on the edge of what's acceptable. And for some, it went way over, especially with the uncut version, which didn't hold much back. It didn't show everything, but it pushed just enough to spark controversy. The game also stirred debate over how far comedy in games should go. Some critics slammed it for being lazy and relying too much on stereotypes instead of clever writing. Others pointed out how it walked a fine line between satire and just straight-up objectification. Even gaming magazines at the time were split. Some treated it like a joke, others refused to cover it at all. And while the ESRB slapped it with an M rating, there were constant discussions about whether it deserved the even harsher AO label, especially after modders started poking around the game's files looking for unused content. The game was banned in Australia, but everywhere else it just flew under the radar. At least officially. In reality, it became a guilty pleasure for a whole generation of gamers who probably had no business playing it in the first place. Most of us hid the disc behind a more innocent title, and some tucked it into a DVD case next to Tony Hawk, just to keep it safe from mom's radar.
Come on, you got better than that. Sorry, kid. You're gonna be smacking your own ass from now on. I am OUT out.
Coming out in the mid-2000s, Rule of Rose didn't just push boundaries, it straight up shattered them. Set in a grim version of 1930s England, this survival horror game throws you into the mind of a 19-year-old girl trapped inside a twisted social structure run entirely by children. But don't let the innocent faces fool you. What happens in that orphanage is disturbing, cruel, and honestly, hard to process. You're not just surviving monsters or solving puzzles. You're trying to stay sane while the game constantly hits you with trauma, isolation, and that uncomfortable feeling that something is just wrong. The main character barely speaks, and yet every scene screams louder than words. It's the kind of game that doesn't need gore to mess with your head. It plays with your emotions and leaves you unsettled long after the credits roll. Critics? Yeah, they hated it. The media backlash was instant. It got banned in several countries, not just for its heavy themes, but because people simply weren't ready to see a horror story told this way. And let's be real, the marketing didn't help at all. Nobody knew what to expect, and when they finally played it, most weren't prepared for the emotional gut punch. A big part of the controversy came from straight-up misinformation. Some European tabloids claimed the game featured scenes of child abuse and even hinted at violent sexual content involving minors. None of that was actually in the game, but once those headlines hit, the damage was done. Politicians in countries like Italy and the UK jumped on the outrage train without even checking the facts. The publisher, Atlas, had to deal with massive pressure, and Sony ended up pulling support for the game in several regions just to avoid the mess. Gameplay-wise, it follows that classic survival horror vibe like Resident Evil or Silent Hill, but clunkier. Combat's not great, and the graphics were already outdated back then. But honestly, none of that really matters. The game wasn't made to entertain. It was made to haunt you. And it does. Back in the early 2000s, BMX XXX tried to be more than just a bike stunt game. It wanted to be edgy. And by edgy, I mean full-on shock value. Released for PlayStation 2 in 2002, this game mixed BMX tricks with adult humor, crude jokes, and yeah, nudity. It was basically a chaotic blend of Tony Hawk's gameplay and late-night comedy gone way off the rails. What made it even worse was the drama behind the scenes. The game was originally supposed to feature Dave Mirra himself, the pro BMX rider, but once he saw what the devs were doing with the tone and content, he backed out. His name was still tied to the game when early promo materials dropped, and that caused a whole legal mess. He ended up suing the publisher, claiming they used his brand to promote something completely different from what he signed up for. Instead of focusing on tight mechanics or smooth controls, the devs threw in strippers, questionable voice lines, and over-the-top character models. Depending on your tricks, you'd unlock cutscenes that had nothing to do with biking and everything to do with pushing boundaries, and not in a smart way. The game ended up looking like it was made for attention, not actual fun. Critics destroyed it. Not just for the content, but because the game itself was a mess. Physics were all over the place. Characters flopped around like cardboard cutouts. It felt unfinished, rushed, and more interested in controversy than gameplay. A lot of players who just wanted a good BMX game ended up disappointed. Compared to classics like Dave Mirra Freestyle BMX on PlayStation 1, which nailed both gameplay and vibe, BMX XXX felt like a cash grab with a bad attitude. Hey guys, if you're enjoying the video, do me a quick favor and check out Xmod. It's a free tool that lets you skip the grind and the boring parts in over 5,000 single-player games. Need more gold? Can't beat that one boss? With just one click, you've got cheats, trainers, mods, and other features ready to go. No setup, no headaches. It's 100% safe with your Steam account, but yes, single-player only. And just downloading once through my link gives a small commission to the channel and helps us keep making more content for you. It takes less than 15 seconds, I promise. But you have no idea how much it helps us out. So, go ahead and give it a try, it's free. Links in the description and pinned comment.
Because that's impossible. Their power is their immortality.
Shadow Man is one of those games that never really fit the mold. It's dark, weird, and definitely not for everyone. The first one dropped in the late 90s for PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2, Nintendo 64, Dreamcast, and PC. You play as Michael Leroy, a literature student who ends up tangled in some serious voodoo business. Things go south fast, and he ends up making a deal with a dark entity that turns him into a kind of undead warrior. Not exactly a fair trade. The tone of the game was heavy. You're walking through grim, twisted environments surrounded by death, ritual symbols, and a haunting soundtrack that honestly sticks with you. Critics didn't hold back, but the game pushed through and built a bit of a cult following. It stood out in a sea of copy-paste horror titles, and for many of us, it was the first time we played something that actually felt unsettling. On top of that, Shadow Man stirred controversy for its religious themes and dark symbolism. Some religious groups called it blasphemous, pointing fingers at the way it mixed voodoo, death, and spiritual references without much filter. The game didn't shy away from showing disturbing imagery tied to real-life beliefs, and that rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. Then came the sequel on PlayStation 2, and that's where things got out of hand. The violence was amped up, the visuals were grittier, but what really made headlines wasn't what was in the game, it was how they chose to market it. And yeah, it was bad. The publisher actually used real tombstones for advertising, not fake ones. Real graves. They slapped game posters on them, took photos, and used that in their campaign. Their excuse? If the family complained, they'd offer compensation. That crossed every possible line. The backlash was instant. Press, parents, advocacy groups, everyone went after them, and honestly, they had it coming. What sucks is that the game itself wasn't the problem. It had atmosphere, it had bold ideas, and it took risks. But all of that got buried under one of the worst marketing stunts ever pulled. In fifth place, we've got one of the most chaotic and overlooked games from the PlayStation 2 era. State of Emergency dropped with all the ingredients to piss people off. Over-the-top violence, cartoonish mayhem, and a storyline that hit a little too close to home. Developed by Vis Entertainment and published by Rockstar Games, this beat-em-up mixed with shooter vibes threw players into a city on fire, literally. A corrupt government takes control, people fight back, and chaos erupts in the streets. Your job? Smash, shoot, and survive through full-blown riots in shopping malls and public spaces. It was wild. The game was meant to be satire, but with Rockstar involved and the memory of real-world protests still fresh, especially after the Seattle World Trade Organization riots in 1999, people weren't exactly laughing. Add to that the fact that the game was first being made in 2001, the same year of a national tragedy in the United States. And yeah, timing couldn't have been worse. On top of all that, the game caught serious heat from watchdog groups and the press because it looked like it was glorifying riots. Some scenes showed civilians getting trampled, stores being looted, and cops getting taken out left and right. It didn't help that the game rewarded you for causing maximum destruction. Critics tore it apart for being tone-deaf. Politicians came after it before it even launched. But here's the twist. It actually sold pretty well at first. Despite the bad press, people were curious, and Rockstar's name alone brought in a crowd. In 2006, they tried to revive it with a sequel. But it came with the same old look, same stiff movement, and no real upgrades. 4 years later, and it still felt like a rushed product. It disappeared fast.
In the morning. Ooh,
Now, we've got one of the weirdest sports games that ever landed on the PlayStation 2. Outlaw Volleyball. Yeah, it's volleyball, but with a full dose of chaos, edgy jokes, and characters that look like they were pulled straight out of a late-night comedy sketch. Released in 2003 by Hypnotix, this game didn't try to be subtle. The whole vibe was built around over-the-top characters, crude humor, and a lot of in-your-face fan service. The female characters? Designed to grab attention more than score points. The dialogue? Full of innuendos that would make your mom unplug the console if she walked in. Gameplay-wise, it was fine. Just your standard arcade-style volleyball with some flashy moves and exaggerated animations. But that's the problem. The game leaned so hard into being edgy and controversial that it forgot to be good where it mattered. Mechanics were shallow, and the novelty wore off fast. And just when you thought it couldn't get any more over the top, the marketing team made things worse. Instead of promoting the gameplay, they doubled down on the shock factor. Trailers focused almost entirely on the female characters, throwing subtlety out the window, but that move backfired fast. Reviewers and advocacy groups slammed the game for objectifying women and using cheap tactics to sell copies. Even some gaming stores refused to promote it, saying it crossed a line for a sports title. Critics trashed it for being immature and tone-deaf, and honestly, they weren't wrong. It had the potential to be a solid sports game with personality, but instead, it tried too hard to be cool and ended up being just loud. Still, if you grew up during that era, there's a good chance you played it out of curiosity or because it came bundled with something else. It's one of those games you don't really miss, but you definitely remember.
and I'm hungry. Ladies and gentlemen, this game is so close, it's hard to see.
In seventh place, we've got a game that went from cult hit to controversy magnet real quick. Fahrenheit Indigo Prophecy hit the PlayStation 2 back in 2005, developed by Quantic Dream. And if you ever played it, you know it wasn't your typical action-adventure game. This one gave players full control over the story. Your choices didn't just matter, they shaped the game's entire outcome, and one decision could twist everything. Sounds cool, right? But that freedom came with a price. The story dives headfirst into some heavy stuff. We're talking murder, psychological trauma, and themes that most games wouldn't even touch at the time. It opens with your character waking up in a diner bathroom, covered in blood, with no idea what just happened. And it only gets darker from there. There were moments that pushed boundaries, especially for a game released in that era. The media had a field day with it. They questioned the age rating, the content, and suddenly this experimental title was being dragged into debates about video game violence and morality. One thing that really turned heads was the uncensored European version. In North America, a lot of the explicit scenes were toned down or removed to avoid getting an adults-only rating. But in the European release, those scenes stayed in. That included fully animated sex scenes that sparked a whole new wave of backlash when players compared versions online. It brought up questions about censorship, double standards between markets, and whether developers were being forced to compromise their artistic vision just to get games on store shelves. Thing is, the controversy only made it more iconic. Despite all the heat, the game stood out because it let players experience a story in a way few titles ever had. It was gritty, weird, and ahead of its time. Let's be real. Bully was never just another schoolyard simulator. It dropped players into a chaotic boarding school where rules didn't matter, and the line between harmless pranks and straight-up psychological warfare was razor thin. Released back in 2006 by Rockstar, the same studio behind GTA, Bully gave you full control of a 15-year-old kid with way too much freedom inside a school that felt more like a war zone than a place to learn. You could stuff kids into lockers, slap firecrackers down toilets, and yes, even yank someone's underwear over their head in a classic wedgie. And the wild part? The game didn't force you to do anything. These events just happened all around you. The school was alive. It felt real. But that realism also brought controversy. Bully caught major heat worldwide, especially from anti-bullying groups and the media. Not just because of the violence or chaos, but because it wasn't afraid to cross boundaries. One example that made headlines was the fact that your character could choose to kiss other boys. For a game from 2006, that was bold, and yeah, a lot of people didn't take it well. Another thing that stirred the pot was the game's original title in some regions. It was literally called Canis Canem Edit, which is Latin for dog eat dog. Rockstar had to change it in certain countries because the word bully alone was enough to trigger legal threats and media backlash. Schools and parent organizations argued that the game glorified harassment and made light of serious real-life issues. In some countries, it got straight-up banned for a while. The government said it was harmful to kids and teens, claiming it encouraged aggression and disrespected teachers. Despite all that noise, Bully became a cult classic. Gamers saw through the headlines and found a game with heart, humor, and a biting critique of school life. It wasn't just about causing trouble. It was about surviving a world that was already messed up to begin with. And for a while, there was hope for a sequel. After leaks from GTA 5's source code, fans discovered that Bully 2 was actually in development. But like so many great things in gaming, it got shelved as Rockstar decided to focus on bigger titles. Still, the dream's not dead. Bully 2 might be just a rumor now, but for fans who grew up with that chaos, the hope is still alive. Second place on this list goes to a game that needs no intro, GTA San Andreas. If you had a PS2 back in the day, chances are this game lived rent-free in your console. And yeah, while everyone remembers the fun, the chaos, and the freedom, the truth is this game was also at the center of one of the biggest controversies in gaming history. Developed by Rockstar and released in 2004, GTA San Andreas pushed every limit. Open world, wild storyline, total freedom. But it wasn't just the gameplay that got attention. What really made headlines was something hidden deep inside the game's files. A scrapped minigame known as Hot Coffee. Originally, the devs had created an explicit interactive scene that could be unlocked through mods. The player could access a private moment between CJ and his in-game girlfriends, and let's just say, it went way beyond the usual cutscene. This content wasn't available in the final release, but it was still in the game's code. And once modders found it, everything exploded. The discovery triggered a massive backlash. Politicians jumped on it, and the media went wild. After the hot coffee mod went viral, the ESRB had to re-rate the game from mature to adults only, which was a huge deal. Most major retailers refused to carry AO-rated games, so San Andreas basically vanished from shelves overnight. That move forced Rockstar to pull back every unsold copy, strip the content from the code, and re-release a clean version to get the original rating back. It was one of the first times a game got recalled on that scale, and it set a whole new precedent for how serious hidden content could be taken. It got so serious that the US Congress launched an investigation to find out if Rockstar had intentionally tried to hide adult content in a game labeled for teens. Senator Hillary Clinton even pushed for stricter regulations on game sales because of it. The whole thing nearly cost Rockstar millions in fines. But in the end, the proposed law fizzled out, and Rockstar walked away with just a few bruises. Of course, Rockstar being Rockstar, they couldn't help but poke fun at the whole thing later. In GTA 4, they added a Statue of Liberty parody with a face that looked suspiciously like Hillary Clinton. And to top it off, holding a steaming cup of coffee. Real subtle, that's GTA for you. Always pushing boundaries and always making noise. At the very top of the list, there's no debate. This is the most controversial game ever dropped on the PlayStation 2. Manhunt wasn't just violent. It was brutal, dark, and crossed lines most developers wouldn't even get close to. Released in 2003 by Rockstar Games, yeah, them again. This game pushed the boundaries of what people thought was even allowed in gaming. You play as James Cash, a death row inmate who wakes up after his execution was faked. He's thrown into a twisted snuff film reality show where he has to survive by taking out dangerous criminals in the most violent ways possible. Not for points, not for glory, just to stay alive. The game's entire setup is disturbing. It's not just about sneaking and fighting. It's about surviving a hellish city while being watched and manipulated by a mysterious director who enjoys watching you kill for his entertainment. Every execution in the game is graphic and detailed, and different weapons mean different animations. The worse the weapon, the more horrifying the kill. And that's exactly why the game exploded in controversy. One of Rockstar's own developers quit during production, saying the whole project felt wrong. He claimed he wasn't the only one uncomfortable with what they were making, but he was the only one who actually walked away. That set off a chain reaction. The media tore the game apart. Headlines everywhere blamed Manhunt for promoting violence. Parents were outraged. Politicians were ready to shut it down. It even reached the US Congress. Lawmakers pushed for investigations. They wanted to know if Rockstar had gone too far on purpose to bypass age restrictions. Lawsuits were filed. News segments ran non-stop. But the controversy didn't stop at headlines and angry parents. In the UK, Manhunt was linked to a murder case involving a teenager, which made things explode in the media. Even though the police later stated the game had no direct connection to the crime, that didn't matter. The story was already everywhere, and politicians used it as proof that violent games were corrupting kids. Retailers like Walmart and Best Buy pulled the game off shelves in certain areas, and Rockstar had to deal with a fresh wave of bad press that kept the game in the spotlight for all the wrong reasons. But here's the twist. Despite all the outrage, Manhunt sold like crazy. Critics praised the gameplay, the tension, the risk the devs took. It scored an 8.5 out of 10 in many major reviews and sold nearly 1.5 million copies worldwide. For a brand new title with zero hype before launch, that was insane. So now you've got two sides. On one, media and developers who say this game never should have existed. On the other, hardcore fans and gaming outlets calling it a bold masterpiece of horror and survival. And somehow, despite everything, the game survived. Manhunt is still banned in several countries, but whether you think it was art or just plain disturbing, one thing's for sure. This game left a mark on gaming history that can't be erased. And hey, if you enjoyed the content, don't forget to download Xmod at least once, won't even take a minute. And just one download already supports the channel with a small commission and helps me keep dropping more content like this for you. And don't forget to hit that like button, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching.